Welcome in. You are listening to a very, very special episode of the What's Next podcast. I've got an absolute ripper for you this time. We're going to be tuning in with Aaron Walsh, who is the mental skills coach for the Chiefs rugby team, as well as a number of other organisations. He's been very good to give me some of his time. I've picked his brain previously for myself personally, for some other things that I've been doing to help me understand some concepts better to continue to push forward. And I wanted to see if we could sneak him in before the end of the year, because I know with so many of you being so aspirational that you will get so much out of this. He's got a very good way with words that allows you to really understand concepts and what they actually mean and how to simplify them. And he's one of the people you need to come back and listen to 2, 3, 4, 5 times, maybe twice in a month, maybe monthly, but you will pick up something new each time. So I'll get him started and I'll try and ask him some good questions so that we can all learn together, and we'll see what we get out of it by the other end of it. So we'll give him a call, make sure he's still there, and rip straight into it. Oh,
g'day, mate.
Oh, for a second there, I thought you were going to leave me hanging, mate. I've got the butterflies already.
No, I was just switching because to be honest, mate, I was just listening to a little bit of Fleetwood Mac and just cruising for a little walk.
Good man.
Yeah.
Well, it's a Tuesday night for you and I, as at the time of recording this. Yep. So are you getting a little bit of your evening exercise in, are you?
Oh, if I'd be really honest with you, mate, I've actually just been hitting golf balls at the range down at my golf course.
Good man.
And I put in my AirPods, hit a few nuts, and it's part of my I suppose my decompression for the day.
Yeah.
I don't do it every day, but just it's a good way just to have a think and sort of focus on, or begin to, have an idea of what you're trying to do the next few days.
Nice, mate. Well, you, as I was saying in the intro before I dialed you in, you're the mental skills coach for the Chiefs rugby team. You do a shitload more than just that, but it's about performance. We're not here to talk about anxiety and depression and those types of things. But we're here to talk about what we can be doing to ensure that we're getting more out of ourselves and just get under control of some of these things, right? And there's no better man than yourself to help us go through them.
Oh, there's probably heaps of better people, but, like even a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Yeah, I don't know any of them, mate, so we'll have to start with you. But do you want to start with just explaining, what mental skills are, what you sort of do in your role, and we'll go from there?
Yeah, so probably the best way to explain it is that, when we think about performance, there's an equation that I love to use, and it's just performance equals capability minus interference. So my job is to either work with one or two things with guys, and girls obviously with the different teams I've worked with, is I'm either increasing their capability or I'm helping them navigate through interference. And, with younger athletes particularly that I work with, it's really just about building capability. So when I think about the mental side, is that when you talk to most people, they have a massive gap between what they think they're capable of and what they end up delivering in life. And I suppose I live in that space of exploring how do we narrow that gap. And once someone's got the physical or the technical skill set, it really then boils back down to, is their mind an asset or is their mind a liability in them pursuing what they're trying to do? And we want to make it an asset.
Nice. So these younger guys coming into a Chiefs environment, for instance, what are some of the foundational things that they're going to learn about early on that they're probably not going to have learnt about previously?
I think the shock of the system for the first years particularly, like they might have come out of NPC and had some experience of professionalism. So, but when they get into our environment, that for many of them, it's the first time they've had to deal with the demands of being a full-time professional athlete. And those demands might initially feel like, geez, we've never trained this hard, or this is really, really difficult. But once they get used to that, what you'll find, the main thing we have to teach them through is how to manage their time, for example. Like they might have to do recovery, they might need to look at film, they've got a gym session, they've got field sessions, then they've got the rest of their life. And often without any skills to manage the demands that you have on your life, particularly if you haven't had to do that much, it can become quite overwhelming until you get some good tools in place.
Yeah. Well, I'd say something that a lot of business owners struggle with as well. So while we're there,
Yep.
What are some of those tools or things that we can be thinking about to ensure that we're all managing our time better?
Yeah. So, I mean, probably the best way to do it is, like, what I'll do is you look at someone and you go, well, so what are you trying to accomplish here? And that's always a good sort of first landing point. Like, so that someone might say, I'm trying to build this sort of business, okay?
Yep.
Okay, well, what are going to be the key areas that you're going to need to develop personally and as a team, if you've got a team, for you to be able to do that? So they might list all those out. And then my next question, which can be a little bit confronting, but it's a good way to gauge things, is can you show me on your current schedule where you're giving attention and energy to the things that matter?
Oh, love it.
And what I've found with my own life, this isn't just a reflection on what everyone else is doing, but I can be a world-class time waster.
Yeah, I think we all can.
And so I suppose it's like without that GPS of where you're heading, you're really vulnerable to take multiple detours along the way, aren't you?
Yeah.
But if you've got a GPS, well, you know where you're going, and then, if we're driving every 10 minutes or half an hour, depending on where we're going, we get instructions. We want you to turn here. We want you to turn here. And so I see the scheduling as the vehicle that we all have to translate our vision and goals and what we want to accomplish into time and space in a tangible way.
So actually using scheduling and being disciplined with it, like say weekly, for instance?
Yeah, so I would do it on a Sunday night. So Sunday night's typically my night. And I'll lay out my week, and then I'll make a list of what I think are going to be the important things for the week. And so, if I've got a big project on, so like if I'm doing, so for example, I'm right in the middle of a review right now,
yep.
I'll schedule how many hours I think I need to dedicate during the week to do towards that review to get it to where I need to get it to from that particular time frame. And without that, I suppose, that discipline, it's very hard to, what we talked about before, to show some restraint around time management. But when you've got those sort of boundaries in place of what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to go about that, then your scheduling or your time becomes something that's really valuable.
Yeah. Is that why they say, give a busy person a task and they'll get it done or whatever? Or people that are, they'll get a lot of things done, and it's because they're learning not to waste as much time, or is there something else underneath that?
I think I think it's a couple of things. I think that competency begets competency, for use of a better phrase. So if you're doing a good job and people recognize that, you'll always have demand for you to continue doing a good job.
Yeah.
But part of doing a good job, I know in my work, is delivering what I need to when I need to.
Got it.
And so, like you think about teams and businesses out there today, and I think it's very, very practical application here, mate, is that, you can have one of two cultures in your team, right, in your business. So one culture is we do whatever it takes to get the job done. It's difficult, if it's challenging, but that's who we are.
Yeah.
We're not going to sacrifice things that are meaningful, like our families or anything. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about we get the job done here. The other side of it is cultures that I see pretty often in the teams I work with, which are they talk a lot about what needs to be done. They may even have a couple of strategy meetings, but their say-do ratio is pretty low.
The say-do ratio. How good is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's
what
plenty
you
of
say
talk.
versus what you do.
Yeah.
What's your ratio with that? And I think a lot of teams have a really quite low ratio. But it's quite comforting to sit in a room with everyone and have all these beautiful ideas, and everyone feels quite proud of themselves, give themselves a tap on the back. But then when push comes to shove, who's going to take ownership and get this done?
Yeah. Are there things that stop people from doing the things that they know they need to do?
1A. You know, like just having, like just backing yourself to go out and do something. Like, I think the projects that I've had the most procrastination over are the projects where I was just a little bit unsure about how I was going to go.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I took that first step, right, which is like I was in the middle of doing a master's that I think we've chatted about, right? And that can be quite overwhelming when you start your master's thesis.
I bet.
But what I found is when I wrote that first abstract, then I got into the introduction, then I got into the work, it all sort of laid itself out. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait to rip into this. But initially, that procrastination, I think a lot of procrastination or hesitancy sometimes has to do with a lack of clarity.
Yeah. Definitely.
You know, like, what am I actually trying to accomplish here? How does that look? What do I need to do today to make that happen? And, you know, the guys that I've worked with, and I think of one of my mentors is a guy called Owen Eastwood, who wrote a beautiful book called Belonging that's become, you know, really, really well received all around the world. And one of the qualities I love about him is he just gets it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like he'll just say, all right, here's the deadline. I will deliver this work by this deadline.
Say you're going to do it and
you
do
know,
it.
I think, yeah, you're just going to do it. But, you know, I think there's an interesting thing. LeBron James was asked just before the start of the season, and I think this is a big key for all of us, is they were asking him, like, how do you feel coming into, I think it's his 18th season in the NBA, mates. It's quite amazing, eh?
Wow.
And they asked him the question, like, how do you stay motivated? You know, what great question, right?
Mm.
And he laughed. He said, motivated? He said, motivation left a long time ago. I operate out of discipline.
How good's that?
You know, so 10% of the days, so if you think about it like ABC game, right? Your A game where everything's firing, you're in the zone and you're cranking along, are probably 10 or 15%. Down the other end of the 10 or 15% days where you just hate what you're doing. And we all have them, right?
Yeah.
You know, there might be once every couple of weeks where you're over it and it just isn't going well and And in those days, you're just surviving, right? You're just getting through. But there's this 80% of the time where we're not at our very, very best, but we're not also at our very, very worst. But we have a choice on a day like that is how we're going to engage with that day to make it an A day.
Nice.
And I think that's where the discipline comes in.
And so does that then like loop back to sort of scheduling and building a routine and knowing that those things are good for us and then just having the discipline to go and do them?
Yes. And I think, you know, we talked about this before we sort of jumped into this call, but I think one of the really underappreciated aspects of our well-being being really, really healthy is when we do hard things well.
Yeah.
And I think this is what that stuff is about, right? So when we begin to look at hard things like difficult things, and, you know, I have two teenagers, so I have to think about this quite often with them, and there's criticism at times around our young people that they're just not very resilient. And I think a lot of it has got to do with the way that we've led and parented them, because if you think that you can insulate people from difficulty and pressure and adversity and they'll grow resilience, you're dreaming.
Yeah.
It's not the only way it's grown, but the most common way we grow resilience is by working through experiences that are deeply challenging, overcoming them, storing those lessons in our experience database, and then we next come to our next little bit of opposition, we're able to just maneuver through that because we've done it before.
That seems so simple.
But if you keep insulating people from pressure, then how do they ever grow that skill set?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Like that seems so simple, right? So, like, how are we getting it so wrong where we keep thinking that the easy way is probably a better option when we're not really going to grow there?
Because I think sometimes we confuse, which, you know, of course, we're not going to do too deeply into the subject of, like, having difficult days and difficult weeks is not the same as having mental illness.
Yeah.
And so I think we're scared sometimes if we push the boat out a little bit, are we going to be okay? And when I talk about pressure, I'm not talking about overwhelming, debilitating pressure. So, like, you know, I'm not talking about, you know, the solo mum who's, you know, trying to work this through with 3 kids and trying to put we want to help her and build her up and actually take away some of that pressure, because that's not helpful. It's actually debilitating and really damaging, right? I'm not talking about that, but what I am talking about is when there are difficult things we know we need to do to be able to get through to the next place that we need to get to, whether in our business or life or our family, and we keep pushing it away and sometimes using, not all the time, sometimes using as an excuse, well, I've just got to look after myself here.
Yeah.
And I'm not opposed to that concept of looking after oneself, but what I'm opposed to is that being the reason why we never grow.
Yeah. I see. So we're like deliberately avoiding the difficult things we know we need to do in life and in business, when really those are going to be the things that probably give us the most enhancement of our own well-being.
I mean, it's an old cliche, mate, but does anything grow without pressure?
Yeah.
We've got to have some sort of resistance that will bring the best out of us.
So then, so pressure's good for us then?
Oh, pressure's fantastic.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah, but as long as we define it rightly, because I don't want anyone to walk away going, well, anybody complains of that their life is difficult, embrace it, man up, and walk towards it. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the things that all of us have in our life that we all know that we have the capability to overcome and walk towards and go through, and yet we're resisting that, or we're not willing to put ourselves in that place because, pressure's a pretty simple thing, isn't it, at the end of the day? What pressure most of us feel, and it's not all the time, but I call pressure is very much a social condition. So can you imagine if you took a lot of, I'll give you an example, I love golf, right? So I'll go play out with my mates, hit a ball on the first tee, and I'm just out there relaxed, enjoying it, right? You've got 500 people there. How am I going to feel?
Yeah, it's a lot more pressure.
What changed? What changed was that now there's a possibility of me failing in front of people. And the failure in front of others, and that ancient thing that arises in us when failure, because you think about it, as a species, sometimes failure, so if you're a caveman and you went out to hunt and you didn't bring back any food for your family, you go hide in your cave and you'd be full of shame, and that could even result in rejection and isolation from the group that you belong to. And I think we're so scared of rejection and isolation and of not belonging that we don't take risks in areas. And if we don't take risks, well, risk involve pressure. So if we don't embrace pressure, we're not taking risks and we're not growing.
Got it. So part of getting better at dealing with pressure is then just accepting that we're probably more scared of the possibility of failure, rejection, and isolation. Is that it?
Mate, well, you think about it in your own life. When you're feeling pressure and you're feeling a little bit iffy, and you feel those hands start to sweat a little, maybe the heart begins to race, people are involved normally, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure.
And your great fear is, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of these people.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Here
good
I
at
am,
that.
the man running, boys get paid and got my nice business going on. I should know what I'm doing. And when you feel that pressure to deliver on that expectation, I think that's not always a bad thing. I think sometimes that's a good thing, mate, because I guarantee what it does for you, you got to up your game. You got to make sure you are delivering. You want to be authentic to who you are.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely go then looking for, if I find myself under pressure too often in a certain area, I think, hang on, what's this teaching me? I'm trying to cash checks that I can't, or I need to go and re-educate or level my shit up. Yeah.
And there's a really interesting, and I'm going to be not very theoretical about it, but it is a psychological theory, and it's called threat opportunity sensitivity. And what it basically tells us is that most people, because of the way we were raised and also our history throughout, how many years we've been around, is that as humans, we don't have a lot of good ways of defending ourselves. So it's a bit different now in modernity, but you think 500 years ago, if a tiger came out or a lion, it's you and the lion, there's only one winner, right?
Big trouble.
So we had to become really good at identifying threat. And if we could identify threat and eliminate threat, that means we'd survive. And survival has always been the driving motivation of people. Now, that survival mindset is quite limiting when you get into a situation like we do in modern life where most of our threats physically don't exist, but yet that same mindset can prevail. And so if you're really threat sensitive, and we'll often work with people who are this way, is that some of the characteristics of that threat sensitivity would be they overthink, there's quite a lot of anxiety, they want to know everything that could go wrong, they want to have a plan in place, there can be a sense of I need to be in control. And what they're trying to do is eliminate the possibility of things going wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're more opportunity sensitive, you will say things are going to go wrong. That's part of life, but I'm going to focus predominantly on what could go right here. So the best language I've found just to communicate this would be, if you want to have a balanced mindset around this, is that you should be focused on the opportunities, but be aware of the threats, not focused on threats and only aware of opportunities.
Makes sense. Do you want to just repeat that again? So focused on opportunities, but
focused on opportunities, but aware of threats. Because if we go back to that first equation, remember, performance is both increasing your capability, so as a business, increasing your capability, but also, and I find the teams that are a high threat sensitivity often become quite reactive in their activity rather than strategic.
Yeah.
Because all they're doing is putting out fires that come along, and they're not actually proactive in this and how to deliver on their strategy.
So then a business that's got a team, for instance, they want to be thinking about that, right? As a team, they want to be looking at and saying, look, we want to be focused on the threat, on the opportunity, but you know, aware of threats and
we're aware of it. We've got to be aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just dealing with them as they come up, right? Or any problems.
Yeah, but also sticking to your mindset, being focused upon the opportunities, not burying it in the ground.
Yeah.
That's not the answer. But, so if we go into like a Super Rugby game, we have a choice to be really focused on what the opposition might bring and just be reactive to that. Or we can say, well, how do we live our identity out here today? Focus on performing in the areas that we're really strong, but being aware this is what the opposition might bring at us.
Yeah. Nice.
So it's basically what we would call strength-based leadership. So we're leading people to operate from their strengths, not be operating from a deep connection to their weaknesses.
But that's like almost the opposite of what a lot of people get taught at school and shit. It's like, here's your weaknesses. Yeah. You need to get better at them. Yeah, and I think a turning point for me, honestly, mate, was when I was with the Warriors back in the mid-2000s, I was just a godsend. I had Graham Henry as an advisor. Yeah. And I remember going to saying to him one day, Ted, when a new All Black comes in, because we're guys debuting in the Warriors, what would you say to them? And it was it'd be really interesting. I wonder what he's going to say. And he said, I would remind them of why we selected them. Nice. You're here because you do this well. The other stuff, don't worry about it. You'll grow into that. But what we want you to do and what we want you to be focused on are the strengths or the superpower, the unique, what's your unique, little bit of, remember The Greatest Showman? Yeah. Yeah, everyone had their unique bit of strength they brought to the table. We want you to do that, and we want you to do it better than anyone else in the world. It's a good lesson for... And I find that so many people spend so much time on weaknesses that don't end up having that much of an impact on overall performance. Yeah, it's draining too, weaknesses, right? Well, you know what? In the real high-pressure space, it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. So, when I've worked in cricket, I've worked with batsmen who have been so focused on a weakness in their game that they talk themselves into that weakness being exposed when pressure arrives. Wow. You think about this, your brain's brilliant, right? So your subconscious is just picking up on messages all the time. So if you're focusing on something all the time, like what could go wrong, your brain has an amazing ability to go, I'll just deliver on that then. Yeah, shit. Because that's what your brain's determined to be most important in that moment. Yeah. So, like if we're someone focusing on what could go wrong, someone focusing on their weaknesses, someone focused on or scared of where they could, things could go really, really badly,
then I almost guarantee you their subconscious is because of how much focus they've had on it. Their subconscious is saying, oh, I can deliver on that bad outcome if you'd like me to.
And then saying it out loud, doesn't that make it even worse? Like saying negative things all the time?
100%. So, there's a guy, and he just actually passes here, a brilliant psychologist called Trevor Mollard. And he was out of the US and he wrote a book called It Takes What It Takes. And there's a story in there that I'll share with you, mate, that sort of sums this up in a really awesome way. Is that there was a guy that was in California and he sat his SATs. He's a bit of a drop kick at school, probably a bit like myself, like ate his lunch, played rugby, mucked around.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, his SAT comes back and he's a top 1% in America.
Wow.
And he goes, heck. Goes, I'm actually really smart here. And so, long story short, mate, he goes to Yale, or Princeton, sorry. He becomes one of the major editors of Time magazine. And then when he's 52, he gets a letter from the Department of Education in California informing him that they actually sent the wrong test to the wrong person. He was actually dumb.
Oh, way.
Yeah. But here's what happened. He believed he was smart, began to have behaviors that reflected that belief system, and all of a sudden, through that belief system and behaviors, he becomes what he was thinking. So a man is what he thinks at the end of the day.
Yeah.
When you articulate that, you're reinforcing, that narrative deeply into your brain.
That feels like something that if more people learnt that at a young age and really grasp that concept, it could be like life-changing for them.
100%. So I'm pretty strict about it in my house. I just don't let my kids say negative things about themselves.
Nice. And
I just don't want them reinforcing a narrative that's not true.
And how do you coach that out of them as such without them being like, oh, come on, Dad, or how could we do that in a good way that doesn't just offend someone?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Before I came out and hit some balls, I did throwdowns with my son. He's a good little cricketer. And he's working on being able to hit better off his legs because he falls over. And, we're working through it and he's struggling a little bit. He goes, Dad, I'm just no good at this. And I said, no, stop there, mate. I said, no, this is a skill that you're still developing. Nice. The truth is, so no BS, we'll stay neutral about this, right? So a neutral thought, so I'll give you the options. A negative thought or an unhelpful thought would be, I'm useless and I'll never get better. A overly positive thought would be, I'm really good at this. And that's just BS, Will. So it's like that. Some people believe you just look in the mirror and say things enough times, it'll happen. I think they call it manifestation or manifesting things. I just don't buy into it. People change things change through behaviors, not through words.
Yeah.
So I said to him, so what's true? What's true tonight is you haven't nailed this yet, but you're working towards it. That's true. So let's just stay neutral.
Nice. So if we catch ourselves saying negative things to ourselves or about ourselves in business and in life, we probably want to be catching ourselves and then actually realizing, not to think like that and just remember that that's just a skill that we're still trying to develop and that's just life.
Yeah, so I just use the phrase, stay neutral.
Yeah.
So neutral is no BS. It's very true, but it's got a solution or optimism attached to it. And that's not some false thing because things can always get better if we work on them.
Yeah. Mate, tell us about the purity of mindset.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say. I've been thinking about this a lot. So, often working particularly at that high end of performance with some of the people I work with, they're conditioned to this. I suppose it's a very normal mindset in some way, but they're conditioned to the mindset that sort of rotates around them. Will be something like this: is that I will put in effort as long as I get reward, and I'll measure the effectiveness of my effort by outcome. Right. So, for example, you think about a year like this year. Outcome's a pretty unreliable measure at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I think of all the businesses in Auckland right now who they have had the possibility of producing an outcome taken out of their hands. So how do they live with some sense of, I can still be proud of where I'm at, even though the outcomes aren't producing? And I suppose what excuse me, what I've really attached onto is that there's an actual purity for all of us to aim towards, where the effort we're putting in is much more internal than it is external as far as a reward. So I want to work hard, because at the end of the day, yeah, it could be bank accounts and roles and positions and whatever, who cares? But mate, the man in the mirror is the most important person to me.
Yeah.
Can I look at him and say, yep, good effort, good work, mate?
Nice.
And if I can do that, even if I don't get the outcome, I don't feel like I'm a roller coaster mentally and emotionally. I can still generate pride in my day and in my work, even if the outcome that I desire doesn't occur.
And
I know that's quite deep.
yeah, no, I'm just trying to make sense of it. So, and especially given that it's so unreliable at the moment for so many people to try and achieve these outcomes, this is a good way for us to be able to still have a crystal clear mindset of like, I'm still progressing, I'm still the person I want to be, and I'm still doing the things I know I need to do.
Exactly. And so there's a guy called David Galbraith, who's an absolute legend in the mind space here in New Zealand. And he had a question that I think was a really great question. And we've introduced it to our family, which was, name one thing today that you were most proud of, and give me an example of where you showed courage.
Nice.
And if we begin to measure our days through internal satisfaction with the effort and the behaviors, and where we've been courageous and haven't backed away, I just think we set ourselves up at that point to be really resilient. Because in some senses, the purest freedom is when the outcome becomes irrelevant. And it's really just about you and the man in the mirror.
Yeah. Is that like chasing your potential sort of thing?
It is, and it's not being satisfied with outcome dictating your value, right?
Yeah, nice, I get it.
Because so often we think, okay, well, my self-esteem will be determined by the result. And, you know, like I've talked to so many athletes over the years who we've had quite deep conversations with, mate, to be honest, around this stuff, because in some senses, they will feel their self-esteem as a human attached to the way they play.
Yeah.
So imagine that. So in the next 50 overs or 90 minutes or whatever, the way that I feel about myself, my mood, and the quality of my relationships will be determined by my performance. Now that's way too much pressure.
Yeah.
So how do we reshape that narrative to allow people to be able to measure something a little bit different, still generate authentic self-belief, self-esteem and pride, even if the outcome that they're desiring is not happening?
Nice. I think that's going to...
And I think that's hard. It's hard work, mate.
Yeah.
Because everything around us wants to validate our lives by external stuff.
Yeah.
Right? That's the normal way life operates. So if you build a big business, if you buy a nice car, if you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then you've got this massive amount of what you probably perceive as you're really successful, right? But we know history sends us many warning signs that external success is no guarantee of internal satisfaction.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that's
what history tells us through everything, through rock stars, through, you know, like through all the people that we think are really important, right?
Yeah. Oh.
I might have to get at that bit. Have I got you?
Yeah, got me.
Okay, cool. So
Oh, we might have
clamoring
we
to give validity, if you want to use that term. They're clamoring, right? They're saying, how do we validate yourself? And I guess what I've probably learnt now over the years, mate, is that if that validation doesn't happen from within, it won't be sustainable from the outside.
Got it. So
that's quite a challenge.
So that's people focusing on like the wrong outcomes and
Yep.
and hoping that they're going to give them all the self-confidence and the self, like, praise or whatever, or
Yeah.
fulfillment, and then getting them and realizing, as we've been taught, that that's not necessarily, the thing that's going to give us that peace of mind and that
No.
purity of mindset.
Yeah. I mean, you would know this through your own work with people. All the happiness studies around the world are not attached to wealth, eh?
Nah.
Like wealth is important because generation of wealth, we're able to help others, right? That's why. I don't know about you, mate, but if I want to make money, it's not like we got good stuff, eh? I got a home, I own a home. How privileged am I? I've got an incredible family. Well, I don't need nothing else. So if we want to generate wealth, what do we want to generate it for? Hopefully it's for the good of others.
Yeah.
But if you're driven by that need of external validation, then you'll never be generous because you'll always be accumulating to make sure that your life appears more successful than the guy next to you.
So there's something really powerful in actually being grounded and helping other people improve their life, surely.
Yeah. Surely, mate. I think about, why do we practice gratitude and, for use of a better, servanthood?
Yeah.
Is because we understand that we can be innately selfish, and because we're conditioned to look for threat, often we see people as a threat rather than as someone that we can help. And so, why we go into service of others and then our own practice of gratitude is because we're trying to counteract and trying to beat down that prevailing voice which says if you give all your best stuff away, or if you give this and that away, or if you give too many of your ideas away, or if you give too much of your money away, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, the last couple of years has taught me, like I've had many people come say, Walsh, you're too generous with your IP. You shouldn't be giving all this stuff away. I'm like, nah, I want to give it away as many people as possible because one, it might benefit them, but two, it forces me to go deeper in what I'm trying to grow in, right?
Yeah, nice.
So why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I?
And you obviously get a lot out of it too, right?
Oh, there's so much rewards. It's like, I had a conversation with someone last week, and it's not you do it for this reason, but, and I'm working in a community down in the central North Island, really quite poor socio-economic community with a leadership team in a mill, and then I'm working doing a bit of work within their community there. And, I've got guys come up and say, hey, that mental skills stuff we've done, it's helped me at work, but what the cool thing is, I reckon I've become a better dad.
Wow.
And you're like, yeah, that's it. I'll do 1,000 more days away for one of those conversations where you think, yeah, it was all worth it. But like this guy's now potentially changing the trajectory of his family because he's been given some tools to do things differently.
I always say with those types of things, like those, for me personally as well, I'm sure it might be the same for others, but those types of conversations always hit different than fucking any invoice you send out.
Oh, way different. Way different.
Yeah.
And it's like I just had another one with a business last week, and I knew they had a tough year. And the guy called me and just said, hey, I'd like a gift to just have you speak to our staff and just encourage them, give them some tools. And he goes, what's the cost? I thought, Koha, bro.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, like what? Yeah. No, just Koha, whatever you can do. That's rewarding.
Yeah, and energizing it. I was just going to say one thing that I do, mate, when I get some of those things that become really meaningful to me, I try and store them somewhere. If they're hard copy, put them somewhere. And then if sometimes I'm going through like a bit of a flat spot or whatever, I'll go back through those things as a bit of a reminder of like, shit, this is what other people have seen in some of the work that I've done, or things like that as well, to just almost get yourself back on track a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and who would have thought, like, if you step back and look at your own journey the last few years, who would have thought that a betting syndicate / boys having a few beers, enjoying the punt, would become a place of belonging and healing and change for people?
Yeah, it's pretty special.
That's wicked, isn't it?
Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps. I got goosebumps just saying that because, like, that idea of just bringing a few people together and seeing what's happening is now translated into, for use of a better term, a movement, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And the movement is the vehicle is horse racing, but that's not the purpose.
No.
The purpose is there's probably a whole bunch of guys out there in their late teens to 35. So I think you might know this. If you're a young New Zealander between the age of 25 and 34, the most common way you'll die in New Zealand is by suicide.
So bad, isn't it?
Yeah. So we know people are hurting, but we know that one of the antidotes to that hurt is creating a place where they can just be authentic, be themselves and belong. And so, you think about, you'll never know, mate. You'll never know how many lives, I know this sounds quite melodramatic, I'm not intending it to be, but you probably have an idea, there's a few lives that actually have been saved through this movement, right?
Mm.
Or people that were really having a pretty shitty time at life and didn't know whether there was much out there for them, all of a sudden get connected to something and feel part of something, and life makes a bit more sense again.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing that so many of us that are in business as well have got the ability to do in just micro circles and whatnot with just looking at the way we do business differently as well. So yeah. Yep. It's so powerful.
I reckon one of the big questions that you got to ask around the purpose of your business, right? So I've asked a lot of companies I work with. So I work with probably 50-50 at the moment, corporate and sport.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to ask straight away is, why does your company exist?
Nice.
And if it's to make money, then I'm like, I think I'm in the wrong place here, fellas.
I can have to go. Yeah.
Like, money's a brilliant and needed resource, no doubt. But if that's the purpose, no, that would be one of the traits of a successful team or successful business would be the ability to turn profit. But it's not the purpose, is it?
No.
So, that becomes, once I see the teams that become purpose orientated or businesses that become purpose orientated, it's no mystery that normally correlates with an improvement of performance.
So is it important for people individually to think about their purpose too then?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if purpose can be quite messy for people.
Yeah.
Because, and I've had so many good, strong conversations with my mate Owen Eastwood about this, and I've actually probably believe in and come around to the way that he's really produced it, is that individual purpose is a very, very new concept. And what's been most common in history has been collective purpose, eh? Yeah. I belong to this group of people and I have a role in that. So I remember when I was working with the Warriors, if I asked a young Pacific Island boy in particular, what's your purpose? He couldn't answer that. But if I said, what's the purpose of your family and what's your role within that? He could answer that.
Nice. Okay. Because it's collective versus individual.
I think we've always been collective. That's what history will tell us. We've always been in tribes and teams, and the industrial age, and this is such an interesting thing for business, right? The industrial age introduced a concept that I think has been really damaging to teams, and that's the concept of having managers.
Yeah.
Before that, we had leaders, and the leaders had two major roles. Their number one role was to look after their people. Their secondary role was to set a direction for that team.
Nice.
And that's been replaced with managers who manage processes, who manage principles, who manage projects, who manage strategies.
Time and tasks and all sorts.
But we got to lead people. Still caring for people and looking after people is still the number one responsibility of leadership.
Yeah. Looking after.
And so, that's our role, right? So that's what we're here to do.
Mate, talk about just quickly the framework win. What's important now and how powerful that can be for people.
Yeah. So I guess WIN sort of came out, just an acronym that sort of I've used particularly in high pressure moments, I suppose, and that came out of really my work in sport, was that often people get really cluttered and really confused and have a lack of clarity in big moments. They feel like there's a fogness in their brain and there's multiple things going on, and I don't know if you've ever experienced the old paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
Where there's too many thoughts going into the brain at one time, and the brain doesn't have the ability to navigate and translate that into action, so it freezes, right? Whereas the WIN sort of acronym enables us to identify what's going to be critical in that moment, and it's a cue to be able to walk towards those behaviors. So it might be like for a cricketer who's struggling, the WIN for his whole innings might be watch the ball.
Yep.
Everything else is irrelevant. What's important now is I watch the ball.
It's not about being a black cap or the future or anything. It's just like right here, right now, reset the focus.
Can't win a moment you're not in. And in big moments, you need to be fully in. You need your whole attention directed to a big moment to be successful in it. And if that moment has been infiltrated by potential outcome thinking or consequence thinking or pressure orientation, what could go wrong thinking, then all of a sudden you're divided in your focus, and big moments require you to be absolutely laser-like in your focus. So a good example, I don't know, people listening, go watch Tom Brady's, there's a thing, 2 minute on Tom Brady when they came back against the Falcons. They were down 28-7. I don't know if you remember the Super Bowl. Came back and win, and they've got him mic'd up on the sideline.
Okay.
And his messaging is so brilliant and simple.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's like, make a stop here, we get the ball back, we score. That was it.
Yeah. Simple.
Yeah, and then the next message was, this is going to be a hell of a story, boys. It's going to be a hell of a story. People will remember this forever. Bang, what do we got to do right now?
Yeah. So that's something we can all apply so simply.
All of us. And especially when you're under the pump a little bit, because I don't know about you, when I'm under the pump, I have too many thoughts, I reckon.
Yeah.
And too many options. And then instead of being instinctive and trusting my instincts, I become hesitant and question my instincts. So it's just narrowing your focus down to the thing that you determine at that moment to be most important, so you can be full on in that moment at that time.
Nice. Mate, one of the other things I've heard...
So question for you, mate, just related to this, like, yeah. I'm really interested in this, is how much, when I go through these, which are quite in-depth and detailed concepts, as a business advisor and as a business leader, do these resonate with people?
100%, especially our demographic of clients. Like a lot of our clients and the listeners to this podcast, they're all aspirational and chasing more, and so the same types of themes kind of come through, and the same patterns within people. So, I think you just articulate them in a different way that makes me, just question how I might have learnt them or how I could potentially reteach them differently. And I'm sure people will be picking up the same lessons that are listening as well. So, yeah.
So from a business perspective, why do you think, it's obviously changing now, like, and, in a personal example, I get approached quite a bit now, but why do you think there's been a hesitancy from business leaders to invest in the mental space as being a foundation of their team performing well?
I'd hazard a guess that it's probably that stigma and maybe that like lack of understanding and education around its importance.
Yeah. Do you think some of the people that have been in that space who have been advising make it too complicated?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably a both and, eh?
Yeah.
Probably the practitioners being a little bit more relevant, but also the businesses being willing to invest in this and seeing it as a critical part of their team performing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess we've kind of gone from, an age of doing a lot of things with our bodies and physically to now doing a lot of things with our minds and thinking, and then realizing, shit, we're not necessarily like there must be ways to get better at this too, just like there are ways to get better at doing physical
we might
things.
have had. Yeah, we might, and it is the same. Like, I'm glad you brought that up. Mental fitness and physical fitness, I approach the same way. So what I mean by that is, if you were to come to me, or for example was when I needed to lose a lot of weight, I went to a trainer and they did three things. They assessed where I was at, they prescribed some programming, and then they monitored my progress, right?
Yeah.
So typical skill acquisition theory. I reckon we can do the same with the mental, Identify one area where you need to grow, look at some practices that you can incorporate every day, and then monitor yourself to make sure you're growing and that those practices are relevant. And if you don't know how, that's where you need to get expertise. That's why people hire personal trainers, right?
Yeah.
Because they understand that even though they know a bit, they still need some help.
Yeah.
I think the mental side is the same. You got to treat it like a skill that you can grow and get better at, not as a personality trait that you've inherited that will never change.
And it's just constantly growing, right?
You got to work on it. You got to have a plan and programming. And so, and this is where the things like breathing or things like going for a walk at night or journaling or planning your week or win or whatever it is, they're just little tools that help you enhance your mental fitness.
Yeah. Is there...
And that's all we're working on.
I suppose there's probably not an easy way to do this as such, because like you say, you've got to actually be assessed and then prescribed and then, monitor. But basically, are there ways for people to be able to maybe hone in on what things are critical for them to start working on? Or is that, you've got to start working with someone as such?
Mate, if we could have a scale and skin folds and body fat percentage for the brain, would be a way. You can only do it conversationally. It's subjective.
Yeah.
So, to sit down and have a chat with someone and find out, like what really is important to you right now. And I would ask them the question, as I said at the beginning, like I'd ask you when we've chatted, where do you want to increase your capability mentally? And you might go, before I can increase my capability, I need to remove some interference. I've got some head noise around this. How do we deal with that? Okay, let's go to work.
I think even if people just look at that themselves and go, where do I want to increase my capability, and then what things are...
You don't need a professional to do that. But what I think a professional enables you to do is to have a much more deeper understanding of the connectiveness, right?
Yeah.
So if I have a sore hammy and I go to my physio and he tells me it's actually got nothing to do with your hammy, your actual back is weak and you're overloading your hamstring. So we need to work on your back. I would have never known that. I just would have thought I should just keep treating my hammy.
Yeah.
So
True.
With the mental stuff, I think the self-diagnosis is helpful, and there's heaps of good information out there for people to grow, but every now and then it might need someone to get alongside and do you understand the connection? Man, I just collapse under pressure. And if we're able to discover why they do that, and then what is the solution to overcoming that, then that changes things almost immediately for them and then how they perceive the issue.
Nice.
So, it's a bit different for everyone.
Couple of things before I let you go, mate, because I'm really starting to chip your time on a Tuesday. But
no worries.
Are nerves much different to pressure? And are they good?
I think pressure's a beautiful thing, and I think nerves are fantastic. So, I like one of the ways that someone communicated it to me is must have been in my early years where they say nerves are the warning that something magnificent is about to happen.
Nice.
It could be magnificently chaotic, and it could be, but nevertheless, your brain is telling your body, get alert here, get alert here. You need to be sharp. You need to be on. What does it feel like? There's 1,000 monkeys dancing in my stomach, and that reaction, I have no idea. But like I've experienced recently in the last couple of years, we're playing in the club champs for golf, and I'm a mental skills guy, and I could feel that pressure of, like what happened if I don't deliver. And I had a situation where I had like a 5-shot lead, mate, going into the final round. And I had to manage myself all around that course.
Yeah.
Because I had all the judgment talk in my brain, like they're going to think that you can't even do it yourself, mate. Or, like all of that stuff. So definitely I think, that those nerves and those pressure, if we can embrace them, work through them and recognize why they exist, then we're able just to jump into the situation, understanding their role.
Did you win the club champs or not?
I did. Yeah.
Yes. Good, man.
Yeah, a couple of years in a row, actually.
Hey, here we go. I bet I guess it shows you that no one's immune, right? Like you've still got to practice.
But all the good players weren't there. That's what I sort of tell everyone, to be honest. Like all the real guns were away.
Yeah.
So it was like, it's just the clubbies like myself. So, yeah, but why should I? I'm a human before I'm a mental skills coach.
True. Hardwired.
So as a human, my hard wiring towards identifying threat, reacting to that threat by sounding alarm systems within my body and my brain, that's going to happen regardless.
Nice. Mate, one of the questions I've heard you ask that I thought's an absolute cracker and always stuck with me is, do you celebrate your wins as much as you critique your losses? How come that's so important for people to think about?
Just because we're so negative.
Yeah. Simple as that, right?
Yeah, we've got to counteract our negativity through celebration.
Yeah.
Like if we just accept success, oh yeah, well that's just what should have happened, and then we're critiquing our failures, then there's never ever a sense of accomplishment, right?
No.
So you ask any kid growing up, and this I'm going to get a little deep here, so just a warning to people listening. I've had so many conversations with people who growing up, their main message from their father was good but not good enough. There's always more.
Yeah.
And how did that make them feel? Or they weren't good enough. No matter what they did. And so in an unhealthy way, some people try to live the whole rest of their life trying to get affirmation over their accomplishments that they didn't get in their development years.
Yeah.
So the failure to celebrate success creates a sense of striving that is unhealthy in some people, borders on the edge of obsession because they're looking for something that's really, really important and necessary to have. And the failure to celebrate success takes that out of the equation.
That is deep. Got my mind going there, mate.
Quite true, though. You think of a lot of people you know.
Yep.
And their drivenness can be dysfunctional drivenness.
Yeah.
Right? It's not healthy drivenness all the time.
Nah, and I suppose then we have the tendency to just pass it down to the next the next generation, right? Or, God forbid, those people become coaches of teams or something and then just destroy 11 soccer players.
Yeah, geez. Or, and it's the sense of, and probably the best way to articulate it is, like, what we want to celebrate is not only outcome. We want to celebrate character, eh?
Yeah.
So that celebration in failure, like I remember with my son, had a good little cricketer, but he had a couple of matches where he was struggling. But man, the way that he got around his teammates, and he's a wicket keeper, and I said, this is the best game I've ever seen you play. It's like, nah, I stunk. I got out third ball,
Yeah.
I was like, nah, mate, this was amazing. I know you got out third ball. I know you're hurting, but you put it to the side and you became the best teammate you possibly can. We need to celebrate this. Let's go to Macca's.
Yeah. Wow.
Like that's worthy of celebrating from my perspective.
Yeah. Celebrate character, not just outcome. That's something we can all think about with staff and teams, right?
Yeah, because, how many of our staff, we judge by what they produce alone.
Mm.
Now, I'm not dancing away from it. Like, we talk about process and behaviours and all that, mate. And, I've said to many players over the year, the evidence of the effectiveness of your processes is the way you perform. So there is a direct connection. If you got your processes right, you'll perform well. But if it's just performance orientated, then there's a jumping around often of people's strategy and processes, and it just gets messy. They're searching for stuff all the time rather than just being confident in what are the core things that make them good.
Yeah.
So things like hard work and resilience and getting up when you don't want to, and having positivity and joy and energy to your teammates. I mean, I think they should be celebrated as much as anyone.
The evidence of effectiveness of your processes is the way you perform. Gee, mate, you've got more one-liners. Yep. It's hard to keep up. I'm like, my brain has to slow down and be like, what? But that makes sense. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, because I'll say, I've had people say, I'm process orientated. I said, how do you know if your processes are really good?
Yeah. Bang.
I'll tell you performance. So if you're not performing, don't tell me you've got a great process. We need to look at your process.
Yeah.
But, or they might say, nah, this is a process I've had in my career for 15 years and go through a lean patch. I trust it deeply. Sweet. Okay. Let's just go with that then.
Walshy, mate, I reckon I could ask you questions all night, but your wife probably either going to get upset or end up sending me a bill. So I'll let...
Nah. She loves it. I'm out of her hair because then she doesn't have... You're listening to what she normally would, so she's probably like, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. But thank you, mate, honestly, for
your
service to not only guys like myself to try and learn, and then whoever I can pass it on to as well, but just the amount of work that you're doing out there, mate. I'm sure it's not going unnoticed, as we were speaking about before.
Yeah.
But there's been some absolute rippers in here as always, mate. Any gems you want to leave us with, or any ground we didn't cover?
A special shout out to I've done a bit of work with the Dairy Farmers Network lately, Women's Dairy Farmers Network, and just some heroes, man, out there. And if I could say anything, let's just keep encouraging our dairy farmers. They're feeling under the pump, and they're the lifeblood of our country, and yet they haven't always got it right. But they're really good people who deserve to, be held in high esteem. And I know some of them are hurting out there, so I don't know if that's relevant to anyone, but let's just keep on cheerleading them on as hard as we can, because they're a critical part of our financial prosperity here in New Zealand.
Nice. Bit of collective purpose there.
Yeah. I love them. They're good people, but they just feel under the pump, eh?
Yeah.
More socially than anything, which is quite sad. They shouldn't feel that way.
I remember when I worked in the Taranaki for quite a while, just brilliant communities of people, and it reminds me of that collective purpose that you're talking about there. And they're all working towards a common goal, and that's legit, just like feeding people at the end of the day for a lot of them. And I know they've always done it tough. It's such a tough industry to work in, where there's so much uncertainty and so much shit that can just go wrong on a farm, right?
Right. So even like now, they might, financially, they've had great payouts and things are going nicely, but I'm not going to get political, but they've been under the pump.
Yeah.
And I mean, our story to the world should be, we produce the cleanest food in the world.
Mm.
And it's the most pure food in the world. We should be celebrating that from the rooftops, from my perspective. But nice, I'm not the Minister of Foreign Trade either.
No. You might be the Minister of Mental Skills at the rate we're going, though. That'd be right.
Oh, no. We're just helping people, mate? So, no, I appreciate you. I appreciate your care for this area and the work you're doing around. I love that we're bringing people together, and that's what we just got to keep doing.
Thanks, mate. All right, mate. Well, we'll keep in touch, and I'm sure people would have got a lot out of this. So I'll drop you a thanks after I wrap this up. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, no worries, bud. See you later.
Wow, what an absolute ripper of an episode there. We've gone for well over an hour. I knew that once we got started, it would be a goodie. It's about 9:15 p.m. wrapping this one up on a Tuesday night. So a long day for but big shout out to Aaron for being willing to give us so much of his time, and I hope that you can take away some lessons from that, because Aaron is getting employed and contracted to work for high performing organisations and sports teams all across the world, not only in New Zealand but internationally as well. So he really knows his shit, and every time I speak to him, I pick something up, or I understand something a little bit clearer, or I grasp a concept and realise, okay, I need to be doing more of that. Or I think there's always a good anchor back to just how basic some of these things are, and how the more we probably talk about this space, the more we're going to get confused. So I wanted to put together a really good piece of content that was very different to mental well-being, although we covered a little bit on that, but some tools and tactics that can actually really help high performers. And I know that a lot of you are and aspire to, and maybe you don't call yourself a high performer, but that's what you are aspiring to do, is to get more out of your everyday life and your business and your relationships and the things that you're doing. So there's some grunty material in there. And I think one of the things I always just love understanding is the importance of not talking down about yourself and not letting other people around you do that, and why there is actually data and research to back up how powerful that can be if you continue to let yourself do that, and especially doing that over a long time, like how damaging that could be. So these areas are always tough for all of us to learn about, no doubt, because it probably sparks some thinking from our end about whether we're doing things right or whether we're not. But remember just to take little areas and slowly work on them and see what differences they have over life. Before we hit record, I said to Aaron how so many business owners struggle with managing their time and squeezing everything into a day and whatnot, and I knew that he would talk about scheduling and how important that is, and it's something that I've implemented after learning it from him and other people as well, around actually putting in some of the things that I know that I need to be working on for Next Advisory and for other areas of my life, and going, right, I'm going to whack that in my calendar. And usually I'll check my calendar every week to see what I've got coming up, and I think, oh, that's right, actually this week I need to do some of that, or I need to be following up some leads, or I need to be figuring out what tasks are draining my energy and taking away my fulfillment from this area of business or that area of business, or how are we actually going to get closer to that goal? What could I be doing in that time period there? Maybe I shut my inbox and I'm not getting distracted by emails. I'm actually doing the things that I've scheduled that I know I need to do, so that I can keep moving forward. So, sometimes it's just very, very simple, and I think that's the beauty with Aaron. He helps us to see it in that light and understand it from that angle as well. So, hope you learnt a stack load there, and I'm sure we'll get Aaron on again at another stage. If you'd like to send some feedback through, we'd love to hear that. lmp@nextadvisory.nz, or drop us a message. Leave us a 5-star review if you haven't previously. Good night and goodbye. Yeah, there you go. Nothing else to finish on there. Obviously, it's getting a little bit late for us now. So we'll see you on the next one.